All right, sorry, fifth graders, about that. I ran out of my 15-minute video time, so we're going to pick up where we left off on question 14. We have set it up here. It's kind of messy and all over the place, but we left off with the actual solving of the problem here. We've combined, we've taken off the discount, and now we are trying to figure out what our change is going to be coming back. So like I said here, I've got 4s in my cents column that I can't take away from nothing in the cents column of my $100 bill. So I've got to come all the way out to my hundreds place and take away from that 1 and make it a 0. And then I'm going to bring back 10s and I'm going to ungroup them to each of these place values. I can only ever ungroup one place value at a time. So I've got to fill those place values before I can borrow from them, before I can ungroup from them. And it'll eventually look like this as my problem, with a 10 in the hundredths place in that last place value and 9s in every place value previous to that. So then it's just a matter of subtracting. 10 minus 4 is 6. 9 minus 4 is 5. Decimal point moves straight down into my answer. 9 minus 0 is 9. 9 minus 7 is 2. So the amount of change I should receive back from that transaction, the buying of the video game, the buying of the extra controller, the discount, giving her the $100 bill, my change back should be $29.56. All right, so hopefully that makes sense for you. All right, the next story problem is a comparison problem. Whatever comparing things, again, looking for terminologies, right? Looking for trying to determine what kind of problem it is. That's the issue with story problems. So this one says 2 teachers held a contest to see who could hold their breath longer. One teacher held his breath for 9.34 seconds, or 9 and 34 hundredths seconds, and the other one held it for 9.62, or 9 and 62 hundredths seconds. So again, identifying what the question is, finding the question mark, and going backwards. How much longer did the second teacher hold his breath? How much longer? We are comparing these two numbers and figuring out which is larger, and more so importantly, by how much. All right? So I need to make sure I put these in the correct order. I need to identify which of these numbers is larger and put it on the top, because when I'm subtracting, I always have to put the larger number on top. And I know, just from my experience, that 62 is larger than 34. The 9s are the same. The 9 whole number is the same. So this will become 9.62 minus 9.34, and that will tell me the difference, how much longer that second teacher held his breath. All right? So another problem here where we're looking at it and saying I've got a bigger number on the bottom of my top. So this 4 here is bigger than the 2 on top. So I've got to borrow from the 6 and make it a 10. I'm going to bring back a 10 to this next column. Now, it's not just doesn't become a 10. I've got to add it to what's already there. So that's 10 plus 2, which makes this now a 12. All right? And now I can solve this problem. 12 minus 4 is 8. 5 minus 3 is 2, decimal point. 9 minus 9 is 0, so 0.28 or just 0.28 would be an acceptable answer. And again, obviously it's a story problem. If it asks for a label, make sure you label it. I'm going to bet that the majority of the test problems will not require a label, but just be observant and see if you would need that. All right, next one, again, a couple more, one more story problem here. It says, a giraffe is 10.34 meters tall, okay? 10 and 34 hundredths meters tall, and it can reach leaves of a tree when it extends its 1.4 meter long tongue. How far can the giraffe reach off the ground? Basically, how much does it have to reach to get to those leaves? All right? So again, identifying what the question is asking. From that question mark, it says, how far can the giraffe reach off the ground? You could kind of put the word total in there if you wanted to. If you read that sentence, including the word total would make sense to do that. So this is an adding problem. All right? And again, the only thing we need to identify, guys, when adding or subtracting decimals is to make sure that we line up our decimal points and that we end up with adding the correct place values together. If I slide this number, I'm going to show you the wrong way to do it right now, or what a lot of people will end up doing with this. If I write this number like this and I add the 4 to the 4, okay, now I'm adding 4/10 to 400ths, and that's not the way we want to do that. So we want to make sure that we don't do that, but that we find a way to line it up. And if you want to include zeros even on the bottom, it doesn't matter. It makes it look a little bit more realistic. There's nothing wrong. You're not changing the answer by adding those zeros. You're just making it a little bit more visually appealing to solve that problem. All right, so 4 plus 0 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7, decimal point straight down. 1 plus 0 is 1. 1 plus 0 is 1. So our answer for that question would be 11.74. Again, the keys to any of these story problems, guys, is simply going to be identifying what is the question asking. Are we adding or are we subtracting? Find the question mark, ask what the question is asking, not the entire problem. Then remembering that with decimals, all we need to do is line up that decimal point and making sure that we have the place values lined up correctly. All right. Now, question 17, again, is not exactly as written. It's not the same format. That is more of a multiple choice style question again. But we were supposed to select the correct version of the expanded form. I didn't feel like typing out 5 or 6 different examples of wrong ones. So I'm just going to show you how we would write this problem out as expanded form. Expanded just means longer, right? We're going to space it out. And in this case, we're going to take each number that we see, obviously excluding the zeros because they don't have a value. We're going to take every number that we see and we're going to put a plus symbol between each of those numbers and their values. A better way to say this is their values. So as I look at the number 1 here, what is that 1 actually in terms of the value? Again, identifying where the decimal point is. That is a 1 in the thousandths place. So I'm going thousands, not thousandths with a THS. So that is 1,000. That 1 is a 1 in the thousandths place. Plus, nothing for the 0. Don't need to do anything with that one, so I'm going to go to the 4. That is a 4 in the tens place. So now I'm going to identify what 4 in the tens place looks like, which is 40. Then I'm going to go to the 3, which is in the ones place. And so that's what it's going to look like in front of the decimal point. And remember that in between each of these values, we are going to have a plus symbol. Now, this is a multiple choice question on the test, so you're simply looking to identify which of these makes the most sense. Well, now we've got another 0 here. So again, no value to that place value. Okay, the next one is the 8, and that is in the hundredths place. Remember that every number after the decimal point, I will need to include the decimal just to show us what place value we're dealing with here. So for the 8, it's going to be 0.08 because that is an 8 in the hundredths place. Where we included zeros on the front side, we include zeros on the back side with the decimal point to identify where that number is. Now I put the plus symbol one last time. Now I put a number for the 6. I have to include that decimal another time. And in this case, it's going to be 3 place values behind the decimal point, so it's going to be 0.006. So that would be the expanded form of that number. All right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. We should have 5 digits up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's kind of my checkpoint and how I make sure that those things work in that respect. All right. Questions 18 and 19 are rounding questions. Again, they're going to tell you what place value to round it to. So the example here is what is 62.842 rounded to the nearest whole number. The key here is, again, to remember our rounding principles. But again, what is the question asking us? Nearest whole number. Remember we said we have to know going into this test what we mean by a whole number. That is technically the ones place, anything in front of the decimal point. But if we're talking rounding, we want to identify the ones place with an underline. We want to point an arrow to the one behind it, the tens place, that tells that ones place what to do. Everything in front of it stays the same. The 2 then goes up because the 8 is 5 or larger. Our rounding principles, 5 or more, it goes up 1. So that 2 goes to a 3, and everything behind it becomes a 0. Okay, I know with my kids, I accept this as an answer. Some teachers don't. They would rather you get rid of those zeros behind the decimal point because it doesn't change anything. So 63 would also be an acceptable answer. And there's a couple of different questions like that, just being specified what place value you're rounding to. All right? And then the last question, guys, on the test is going to be reading a graph and then solving a problem off of that graph. So being able to interpret what they're asking. So they're telling us what the graph is. Annabelle is growing 4 different plants for science class. This graph shows how much each of her plants grew just this week. Okay, so we can see that plant B obviously is the largest plant or grew the most this week, and that plant C is the lowest one. So questions that you might be asked off of this graph and asked to solve, guys, I'm going to scroll up here just a little bit. Questions you might be asked to solve is, what do all the plants total together? In that case, How tall, how much did the plants grow all together? I'd have to add all of those decimal numbers together. But the question I'm going to ask you today, and I'm not saying that this is the one from the test, so just be aware, you got to read the question. I'm going to say, what is the difference between the biggest and the smallest plant? Well, I've got to first identify on the bar graph which is the biggest and which is the smallest. So plant B is the largest, and plant C is the smallest. So if I'm looking for the difference means a subtraction problem. So now I need to set my problem up. Plant B would be the largest, so that's on top. That would be 2.6. Okay, and plant C being the smallest, I'd follow that line across here to figure out where that is, and that's 0.8. All right, and I said difference, which means it's a subtraction problem. I'm looking for how much of a gap, how much of a difference is there between the biggest and the smallest. All right, bigger number on the bottom, lining up my decimal points. 8 is bigger than 6, so I have to go to the ones place and borrow from that 2 and make it a 1, bringing back a 10. Okay, now that 10 gets added to the 6 that's already there. This becomes a 16, not a 10. 16 minus 8 is 8, decimal point straight down in my answer, and 1 minus 0 is 1. So my answer, if that was our problem, what is the difference between those two? It would be 1.8. And again, we see that it's measured in inches here, so that would be probably something that would be good to include in the label there as well. All right, so guys, hopefully that helps you on your Unit 2 test. If there are any questions, please contact your teacher. If something on this video didn't make sense or it confused you more, by all means, please contact your teacher before you start taking the test. That's why we're having your review. If something doesn't make sense, you can get that opportunity then to ask those questions beforehand. Good luck on your Unit 2 test, guys, whether it be later today or tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing some great scores. Hopefully this helped.